Good evening, everyone. This is the Mycological Association of Washington. It's our January meeting. Behind me on my right, your left, is our logo, if you haven't seen it. This is an interesting event. We've not had a January meeting for at least 5 years because we would normally not find mushrooms this time of year, but we elected this year because of the unique circumstances that we would have a January meeting. So you're participating in a rather unusual event in that regard, in this particular context. So the way it's going to work, I'm going to speak for maybe 5-10 minutes about the club and some of the things that we're doing and the board members. A little bit of news with fungi. I'll then turn it over to one of our speakers who will go on for about 30 to 40 minutes. Then our 4A chair will talk about a few mushrooms that are out there, and then we'll close the evening with a longer presentation. And I'll talk about those in some detail a little bit later. So first of all, let me go ahead and share my screen here so we can talk about the real meaning of life. All right, so if you haven't gotten the MAWDC, that's our official logo. I've tried to shy away from MAW because it's has other connotations that are. So in that, this is a time of spirituality, and it's also Happy New Year to everyone. This is a mushroom shrine, and it is our way of expressing our interest and prayers for a good mushroom season. Some of us have these things, and it's a part of our, and if you care to visit the official mushroom shrine, we will put time tickets on the website, and if you would like to, but masks are required, of course, for any visitation. So this is a pledge for a new year. So who are we? And just while I'm on the subject, normally when we would have meetings in place, I would ask who are the new members, and I can't do that here, and I don't really want to, but and then we find out where you're coming from. And I get a lot of email. I get most of the email that comes in, and a lot of people wonder what we do. So we are mostly amateur mycologists, and our whole mission is people who are interested in just learning about it. So those of you who have asked that question, that's exactly who we are, and that's what we do. So here is the MAW board. As I said, I'm William Needham. You'll also hear from Tom McCoy tonight, who's the program chair, and Mitch Foray, who is the 4A chair. You'll notice the bottom bumper sticker. If you want to contact any board member, you can type the name of the position, as in treasurer or president, at MAWDC.org. So that suffix is consistent, and just the name of the board member. The title. And if you don't want to do that, you can just type info or admin or anything at MAWDC.org, and I get it. So you don't really even have to, you put XXX and that would go also to me. That's the way it defaults. So the main thing we've been doing and will be doing for at least the first 6 months of the year are, well, we'll be doing programs all year, but it may be exclusively programs for at least a little bit longer. I'll talk about that shortly. So tonight's program is listed there for 5 January. I'll brief that at the end again when I turn it over to Judy. And next month we'll have summer mushrooms, which is obviously timely. And then finally in March we have biopesticides. We'll update this for April and May once we get those set up. Note that all programs will have a mushroom identification segment where you can send in pictures of your mushrooms to the 4A chair, Mitch 4A, at 4A's at MAWD, and he will include them in his talk. So that's the way you can get your mushrooms identified and talked about. So a couple of meeting notes. We have our board of directors meeting at the end of this month, 28 January. We've had some really good inputs from people in the club here in the last several months. One of which was to have an introductory mushroom course, which we had in December. You may have been able to attend that. It's on YouTube if you want to look back at it. But other ideas like that are welcome. Having more of those, having a program you might be interested in. Any recommendations you would care to share would be easily sent via the email that I talked about earlier. Or if you want, you can actually attend the board meeting in person. We allow anybody to attend. Obviously, there's limitations to that, but if you are inclined to pitch your own idea, then you can do that. Second bullet is just kind of where we stand with the COVID thing. We are actively looking at what we can do to get out. We think we'll probably start forays and maybe even a morel foray pretty early in the year with certain restrictions on numbers and contact and the usual stuff. Under community affairs, interestingly, about a month ago, we have a program called Mycoflora where we identify mushrooms by DNA with our facilities who do the DNA analysis at Duke University. We had one of the people who lived in Maryland had her dog ate a mushroom and the dog died. She contacted MAW and we were able to go through, actually it was Jared Urchek, who was the second vice president, and Martin Livesey, who was one of our Mycoflora members, did the identification. So she sent MAW a check for $200 and was very, very thoughtfully pleased with knowing that her dog's death meant something in identifying poisonous mushrooms. So that's a key role that we play. I think we should perhaps offer that more widely than we are now, just as a reflection of how appreciative people are. Finally, the last bullet, I mentioned this last time, I repeated it this time. NAMA is the North American Mycological Association. It's our kind of the parent organization. They are looking for a membership director, which has some benefits. So if you're interested, you can contact our NAMA representative, nama@mawdc.org, who's Bruce Boyer, and he will share the information on that with you. And finally, a couple interesting issues have come up here recently, and there are 4 of them. So many of us eat mushrooms regularly, even white button mushrooms. I eat a lot of them. They're easy to get in the supermarket. They're actually quite helpful. But they did it, and we all think they're good for you. Well, this is a study done in Singapore with 600 seniors who ate at least 2 portions of mushrooms a day, and that's 3/4 cup, that's their definition. And they gave them a whole battery of psychological tests over a fairly long period. You can see it's over 8 years, and there was measurable improvement. So eating mushrooms is good for you. The second one was sent in actually by Tom. I mentioned this earlier. Fungi can be bad and good. Candida auris has emerged as a antibiotic-resistant fungal disease, actually, that's become problematic. And this is a kind of an opening salvo on what we're going to do about that. This is a CDC report. The third one is sort of on the macabre note of this continuing issue with how we end our time here, and one of them is an idea of a mycelium coffin, which was created in the Netherlands. It was in the Guardian as a living cocoon, and it's quite an interesting idea where you can actually join the worldwide mycelium yourself, I guess. And then finally, the last one's from the Sporophore, which is our newsletter, which is the editor is Andy Green, and she put this in. But I revisited it because I was asked to give a talk by the Sierra Club of Maryland on endangered fungi, which I'm giving on the 13th of January. And I was pretty surprised by this whole notion of endangered fungi. I ran across this article that Annie wrote about the MAWDC mushroom of Japan. And I also looked on the web, and there's actually an article by Thomas Rail, who is the former newsletter editor. In 2014, there were only 5 endangered fungi on the entire IUCN list. There are now 454. So if you want to Google that, it's kind of interesting to look into what, and mostly lichens, by the way, because everything else is pretty obscure. How would you even know? So it's an interesting subject that I will try and do something with. I'm not sure it's going to be all that entertaining for the people who have decided they want to attend, but anyway. So finally, that's all I have to say. If you have any questions, you can contact me at President of MAWDC or info, and I'll try and answer them. So I'm now going to turn it over to Tom, who is going to introduce our first, Tom McCoy, our program chair, who will introduce our first speaker. So
went on holiday and didn't remind you guys that you can send me pictures. I'm always accepting pictures, so feel free to send me stuff. Don't feel like you need a reminder, because I'll take the pictures whenever you get them. But I'll send out a reminder this time. I know there's not too much right now, large and fleshy, but as you've just noticed, you might be able to find some cool crusts out there somewhere. So first one, submitted by Stella Waldman. She found this on an old cherry tree. I was putting this into what I think is a Trametes, which is the same genus as the turkey tails, as Judy just covered very well. You can see it's got pores. It's not staining brown or kind of that reddish brown, because the Daleopsis compurgosa tends to stain a different color. Doesn't look like it's staining. I'm not sure exactly what species this is, but I think it is a Trametes. And you guys may know the species, or anyway, feel free to chime in if you feel like it. But anyway, this is another one of those Trametes. I'm sure if I had some sort of polypore book, maybe I could dig deeper. Or anyway, moving right along. This was submitted by Tom McCoy. Tom sent me a few just recently, and this is another one that we just got to go over. This is, you can see it's fairly smooth on the other side surface. If you look closer, it does have very shallow pores. This is the Piptoporus betulina, or now they've changed it to Fomitopsis betulina. This is the one Judy was talking about that Utsi had. I've heard it has anti-helminthic properties, so maybe the medicinal, if you had a stomach ache, you thought he might have worms, he ate a little bit of that and hoped it would take care of them. Fairly common, pretty easy to see if you got birch around, because they can be pretty large. Okay, this is another one by Tom McCoy. You may remember this one from the bioluminescent talk. So it kind of looks, it's your typical mycenoid mushroom, and as you can see on Tom's hand there, it is actually, whoops, let me go back. Trying to change, move my video over there. You can see it stained his hand right here. This is Mycena hematopus. This is the bleeding Mycena. So it kind of looks very nondescript. These are actually a little pale. A lot of times when you find them, they're going to be a little bit more this dark brown, reddish color. And when you break them, they'll have that latex that'll start dripping out, and that's why they call it the bleeding Mycena. I think you guys probably recognize this from the talk just now. Very common sight. This is your typical true turkey tail. It's kind of got that purplish color, the zonations going on here. There's not a very clear shot of the undersurface, but it should be pure white and has pores. A lot of times I'll tell people kind of rub the surface, and if it feels a little sandpapery, even if you can't quite see the pores, that can kind of indicate that the pores are there. Whereas you get those steriums, they feel really, really smooth. And that's kind of another way you might be able to tell the difference between a sterium and a turkey tail. Here's another pretty common one. Especially this time of year, they kind of like it when it gets cold. You'll notice that this is growing on a pine. Judging by the bark, you may have heard of witch's butter. Witch's butter actually grows on hardwoods. It also, similar to the Marulius that Judy was just talking about, it seems to be attacking the sterium, is growing from the mycelium in the wood. This is completely different. This is Dacromyces chrysospermus. It looks kind of similar, but this one's always growing on pine, and it does have different features. And as Judy had mentioned about learning the names, this chrysospermus, chryso means yellow and spermus means seeds. And if you were to take a spore print of this, it actually is a light yellow. So chryso means yellow. So anyway, it's kind of like yellow seed. So it has yellow spores. This one is one I am not very familiar with. Renee DeBoer found this, not in our area. She found this in Arkansas. I believe she was visiting family. Looks kind of puffballish. It was growing in pine, and she gave me a suggestion, which I agree with. I believe this is a Rhizopogon species. So this is kind of one of the false truffles. It tends to kind of bulge out from the soil. So it's not growing on top like a typical puffball. She said that there was like black mycelium growing all around it. I'm not too familiar with these, but the gleba inside looks like it's the correct color, even though that's similar to some of your typical polypores that we find. Apparently some of these are mycorrhizal, so they are mycorrhizal with these pines that they're growing with. From our area, I'm more used to finding something like a Scytholythis, which would have more of these like strange chambers all throughout the gleba instead of just having this kind of puffball looking look to them. Anyway, I thought that one was pretty interesting, but I'm not too familiar with that one. Anyway, thanks much. That's all. And Happy New Year to everybody.
Okay, thanks, Mitch. It was a tough act to follow with Judy's going through every polypore there was.